Welcome to Code with Richard. In this episode, we're going to learn how to roll virtual dice. So we'll need two new concepts to roll these dice. The first one is random numbers, because rolling a die is like generating a random number. And I'm going to introduce loops. Loops allow us to run code multiple times, and that'll make this exercise a little bit more interesting as it'll allow us to roll multiple dice all at once. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out how to roll a single die. I'm going to use standard six-sided dice for this example. And as you know, rolling dice is like generating a random number between 1 and 6. So the first thing I actually need to do is import the random module. This module is included in Python, but if we're going to use it, we actually have to import it. The next thing I'll do is I'll create a variable. I'm just going to call it roll. And when I roll my die, I'm just going to create a random number. So this is the name of my library, random dot randint is the name of the method I'm going to call, and then I have to give it two parameters. And I'm going to say 1 and 6. And what this does is it will create a random number between 1 and 6 inclusive. Now, all I'm going to do is print out the result of this. I'll save it, and we'll go over here and we'll run this code, and you can see it generated a number. And when I run it multiple times, it, created a lot of the same number, but it will create pseudo-random numbers, which means they're not completely random, but it tries to create random numbers for you, kind of just like rolling a single die. And so as you can see, if we want to roll multiple times, we can just execute this program multiple times, but what would be even more interesting is, can we roll multiple dice all at once? Now I'm going to introduce loops. Loops can be used to execute code inside of it multiple times, and they're actually very easy to use. To start a loop, in this case a for loop, I'll type for, and I'm just going to use a variable name called n. N is very common to use as a number. And in, I'm going to say range, I'm going to say 3, and put the semicolon. Range will enumerate the values from 0 to the input minus 1. So in this case, 0, 1, and 2. And I'll talk about that in a second. And inside of the loop, I need to put a tab. I'm just going to print out the value of it. And to make it a little bit more clear, I'm going to add a comment up here. The pound symbol basically just tells Python to ignore this line. And I'll explain the range of 3, if we were to examine it, contains 3 values. 0, and every integer up to this input 3 minus 1, which is 2. And so the first time that this loop is run, when we print n, n will be 0. The second time through, n will be 1. And the third time through, n will be 2. So we would expect this to print 0, 1, and 2. Let's go give it a shot over here. We'll run it, and here we go. Here's the expected value, 0, 1, and 2. So this is an easy way to execute code, in this case, this print statement, multiple times. So let's put these together. So I've already imported our random library, and let's go ahead and say we're going to roll our dice, let's say 3 times. So I know I can do a for loop, for n in range, go to 3, and we'll put a colon at the end of this. And of course we need a tab to have indentation here. And let's roll 2 dice. So die number 1, I'll create a variable, is going to be a random number from 1 to 6. Let's go ahead and copy and paste that here, and we'll call this die number 2. So die number 1 is a roll, and we'll get a number between 1 and 6, and die number 2 will roll it again and get another number between 1 and 6, and let's create another variable called sum, and we'll add these up. And let's not forget the plus. And now we can print out the results. And so let's make it a little bit more fun. And we can say for my roll number, and we'll say N, I rolled a 10. I'm going to save this and let's run this code. And the output is what I expected. So we have roll number 0, I rolled a 4, roll number 1, I rolled a 12, roll number 2, I rolled a 7. We can make this look a little bit more human readable. Instead of n, we can say n plus 1. So when we output it, the roll number starts at 1 and goes to 3 instead of at 0 into 2. So let's look at what we did. We imported the random library so we can generate random numbers, and we created a for loop in the range from 0 to 3 minus 1, or 0 to 2, and that's what we see over here. So we're going to execute this code once for n equals 0, once for n equals 2, and once for n equals 1. But actually not in that order. From n goes from 0, 1, and 2. Die number 1 is a random number from 1 to 6. Die number 2 is another random number from 1 to 6. I'm going to sum them up here into sum, and I'm just going to print the output. For my roll number n plus 1, I rolled a sum. And so I can run this multiple times. And as we would expect, the numbers on the right are changing because the computer is actually generating different random numbers for each one. Let's say I wanted to roll more dice. Maybe I want to roll 30 dice. And maybe my dice don't go from 1 to 6. Maybe they go from 1 to 10. Or one goes from 1 to 10 and another one goes from 1 to 20. We can see what happens. We can go on the right-hand side and we can see that I rolled a bunch of times and my values that I'm getting are different. They correspond to 30 rolls and the 2 dice that are rolled in some. Thanks for joining Code with Richard. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Thanks.